Irene, and her main research interest is how we can understand other people and how context and life experiences influence this understanding. And her PhD project focuses on the factor parenthood and how it affects specifically empathy and theory of mind. So Irene, please, the floor is yours, and I welcome everyone to ask questions during the talk and afterward.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, my talk is on the question whether motherhood is a moderator of empathy for pain, and these are the results of an fMRI study. Okay, so the background here is that we know from a few studies now that empathy can be modulated. So depending on who is the target of our empathizing, we have more or less empathy with this person. And it also depends on who is the one who is doing the empathizer. So both the one who empathizes and the one who is empathized upon influence how much empathy we experience. And we also know that empathy is quite important for parenting. So parents, empathy actually facilitates a positive development of their children. And there is also quite substantial overlap between the parental brain and affective processing areas, as well as specific empathy regions. So this led to our hypothesis that mothers have a higher activation in empathy-related areas than non-mothers in response to empathy for pain, and that this effect might be stronger for children than adults. So that is specific to that they are using it in context of their parenting. The design that we used was that we tested 50 women, 25 mothers. The women were all between 20 and 50 years old, and they saw pictures of people either being in a painful situation or in a neutral situation. And those situations were well matched. So for example, someone uses a knife, and the picture of them just using the knife versus a picture, they used a knife and they actually cut themselves. So that was the first manipulation of the pictures. The second manipulation of the pictures was whether the protagonist of this picture was a child between 4 and 6 years old or an adult. And the task of the participants was to put themselves into this person's position, kind of imagine that you were this person who is in this neutral or painful situation. And additionally, because sometimes it was quite hard to tell whether it's a child or an adult, we had a face at the beginning of each block showing, for example, please imagine that you're in this child's position or in this adult's position. And also to ensure that we actually have a difference between these painful and neutral pictures, and to ensure that we have the participants' attention, we had painfulness ratings after 50% of our pictures. And just very briefly, those are the behavioral ratings for this painfulness question inside the scanner. So we have here separated the neutral and the painful pictures, and we can see that there is a huge difference between the neutral and the painful pictures, but there is no significant difference between the adult stimuli and the children's stimuli. And there's also no significant difference between the mothers and the non-mothers ratings. So there are no differences in the ratings, just between the painfulness manipulation of our design. Our pre-processing and analysis, we used fMRI prep, which is an automated processing pipeline for fMRI. And then we did multivariate analysis where we used linear support vector machines to classify the data either into mothers versus women who don't have children, or into this was when someone saw an adult stimuli versus this was when someone saw a child stimuli. And we used leave one pair out cross-validation, so either one pair of subjects or one pair of stimuli was left out in the training process, and then we tested whether this is significantly above chance. And we also did a univariate analysis with a full factorial model in SBM12 with the factors motherhood and protagonist, and these were based on first level contrasts that already subtracted the neutral pictures from the painful pictures. And this we also used for region of interest analysis, where we extracted the activation in those regions and then did a Bayesian ANOVA in DASP to test for possible differences. The multivariate analysis showed that it is possible to predict the motherhood of a never before seen participant above chance with 55.6%. This was significantly above chance. And then we also saw that it's possible to predict the protagonist of a never before seen stimulus above chance with 63.9%. This was highly significant above chance as well. And this is the analysis of the region of interest. The analysis, the univariate results. We had 4 regions based on a recent meta-analysis. And in 2 of those regions, we found a difference between the mothers and the women who don't have children, with mothers exhibiting higher activation in response to the empathy for pain. And then in 1 region, we actually had the effect that adults led to a higher activation than children, which was quite unexpected. So this is kind of the conclusion. We did find that mothers had a higher empathy reaction. We obviously, based on this, we don't know whether it's simply because more empathic women tend to have children compared to less empathic women. And we also don't know whether it's due to actually the parenting leading to this higher empathy reaction. Although we were able to rule out relationship status and age and socioeconomic status and stuff like this. And with the protagonist, it was a little bit less clear-cut because we actually expected children to lead to a higher activation, but that's not what we found. We found in 1 region that adults led to a higher activity. So it might be due to the similarity between the people in the stimuli and the people in the scanner. And we didn't find any interaction with motherhood. So basically, this effect that mothers had a higher empathy reaction was completely independent on whether they were watching a child being hurt or an adult being hurt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene, for your talk. And let's see if we have questions from the attendees. Okay, we have one. So Sevgis asking, what will be the follow-up of this study?
Yeah, so we have actually 1 follow-up that we're doing right now, where we're looking at other more cognitive social processes. So if it's not about an emotional reaction to children, what if it's about figuring out what a children is thinking right now, for example, so theory of minds that we're looking at. And also a follow-up would be to try to get to this difference before people actually have children. So maybe look at people when they're young, ask them, do you want to have children in your life? Is there already a difference in empathy reaction there before people have children, to kind of get at this causality effect?
Okay, thank you. And another question from Katarina. How do you explain that there were no differences between mom and no mothers in the behavioral results, but significant classification results of fMRI data?
So our behavioral question in the scanner actually didn't ask about empathy. It asked about how painful does this look. So that's not really getting at the same reaction that we're actually measuring with the fMRI. So with the fMRI, we are measuring the brain reaction of the painful pictures compared to the neutral pictures in regions that are associated even with self-pain, but also watching others' pain. And our ratings really are just about, does this picture look more painful? And with those, we actually hope that we wouldn't get any differences, because otherwise we could argue this has nothing to do with the factor adults versus children or the mothers versus non-mothers. It's just that this looks more painful for some people than for others. So it's in the stimulus material and not in the actual reaction. So we were hoping for that.
Thanks. We have another question from Mert. So, and this is something that I also wanted to ask you. So, was there any control on the gender, sex of the children participated in the study? Do you think that there will be any difference?
So the stimuli were 50% male, 50% female. So both in the adult and in the children stimuli. We did not control though for whether the mothers like just have daughters or just have sons, simply because it was too hard to already match it as it was. So we didn't do that. Yeah.
Okay, and follow-up question of it could be from my side. Have you also looked at the if the let's say time after having the child is influencing it? So kind of if there are some relationship with the age of the own children of the mothers participating into the study?
Yeah, so we had the mothers had to have at least one child in the age of our protagonist of the stimuli. So like I think it was between 4 and 8. So they needed to have at least one child in this age range to assure that they actually have this kind of like experience with children that age. But then when we also tried to look at like, is there a difference between mothers with a lot of children versus mothers with one child in this age range and stuff like this? And for this, we didn't find anything, but it might also not be enough variation for this, because we obviously had the typical case of 2 children quite often. Not really a lot of people had more children than that or less children than that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for answering it.
Thanks.
And if we don't have any more questions from the audience, I think we should all. Okay, we have one, from Daniel. Would you expect the same results for fathers? That's an interesting question.
That's a very good question. I like that one. If we're talking about primary care fathers who've spent as much time with their children, then yes, I would expect the same result. We did not include it because it's just really hard to find enough primary care fathers that spend that much time with the children. But if that was given, then yes, I would expect the same. And there is also a paper that looks at primary care fathers, primary care mothers, and secondary care fathers. And the primary care fathers do have a lot of overlapping changes in the parental brain compared to the primary care mothers there.
That's very interesting. Okay, so